Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Monday is an important day for the many Nigerians unhappy with Bola Tinubu's win in February's presidential election. Security's tightened in Abuja as judges start hearing opposition petitions to overturn the result. Also, the Sudanese pin their hopes on peace talks in Saudi Arabia, delivering a humanitarian truce, but those hopes are slim. Conflicts displaced hundreds of thousands and forced tens of thousands into South Sudan. And Guinea looks into an outbreak of chemical burns amongst fishermen. A chemical spillage at sea may be to blame, but for now the cause is a mystery. Symptoms do resemble those suffered by Senegalese fishermen in 2020. But first, security was tight around the Court of Appeal in Abuja on Monday as 5 judges began hearing a crucial petition seeking to annul the results for Nigeria's presidential election in February. President-elect Bola Tinubu is due to take office on the 29th, but the runner-up and third-placed candidates in the poll and several other opposition figures have called for the results to be annulled. Our Sam Olukoya brings us more from Nigeria.
The fight for Nigeria's presidency has now formally shifted from the polling stations to the court as the Presidential Election Tribunal begins hearing in the capital, Abuja. Bola Tinubu, who won the election on the platform of the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, is being challenged by the candidates of the 2 main opposition parties. Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party and Peter Obi of the Labour Party, who came second and third respectively, are also claiming to have won the election. Atiku, a former vice president, wants the court to order another election, saying there were lots of irregularities during the previous election. Obi, who is also making similar claims of electoral irregularities, said Tinubu and his running mate were not qualified to participate in the election in the first place. The presidential elections and its outcome has caused a lot of tension in Nigeria, with the country divided as to whether or not Tinubu won a free and fair election. Some Nigerians allege that talks working for the ruling party intimidated many people who will have voted for the opposition candidates. But Tinubu's supporters dispute this claim. There is anger on both sides as hearing into the election petitions commence. It is very likely that the legal challenge will still be on when Tinubu is sworn in as president at the end of the month.
Sam Olukoya there for us. Now, the death toll from 4 days of devastating floods in South Kivu and DR Congo has passed 400. Families of the missing worked desperately alongside rescuers on Monday, sifting through the destruction, looking for survivors.
Residents in the village of Bushushu make their way through what was a vibrant market just a few days ago. Heavy rain overflowed the neighboring river last Thursday, washing away everything in their path in a matter of hours. This woman had relocated here with her family in January from a neighboring province, fleeing the fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 rebels. She lost her 2 children, her 2 sisters, and her parents in the floods.
I no longer have a family, and I no longer have fields. Now I have to find a place to sleep. I know that my husband is alive, but the children are dead.
Hundreds of bodies have been recovered, but many remain missing, and survivors are struggling to get hands on basic essential goods.
We think that many bodies washed up in the lake. They'll be visible after 3 days. And we wonder how we'll get through this. We don't have body bags, and we don't have enough funding for what we do.
The disaster in the Democratic Republic of Congo comes after neighboring Rwanda and Uganda were also recently ravaged by floods. Climate researchers say global warming is the culprit behind the torrential rainfall in Africa, and highly vulnerable communities on the continent, which contribute the least to global heating, is bearing the brunt.
And as airstrikes continued to rock the Sudanese capital on Monday, truce talks in Saudi Arabia failed to make any progress. More than 750 people have been killed and hundreds of thousands uprooted in a little over 3 weeks of fighting in Sudan. The country's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and his deputy turned rival, who heads up the RSF paramilitary, Hemeti, have sent representatives to Jeddah for negotiations aimed at establishing a humanitarian truce. Bastien Renouy has more.
After 3 days of negotiations here in Jeddah, it's still very difficult to know what's happening during these closed doors meetings. So far, we know that very little progress has been made, that the Rapid Support Forces and the army did not meet in person. Instead, they met with Saudi negotiators who are trying to find solutions to implement a humanitarian ceasefire. Both the army and the Rapid Support Forces already said several times that it's still too early to reach a peace agreement. So the idea is to find a solution to bring humanitarian assistance to those in need, mostly in Khartoum, in Kordofan and in Darfur region. Martin Griffiths, the United Nations Under-Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs, traveled from Port Sudan, where he was last week, to Jeddah to meet with the military, to meet with the Rapid Support Forces in order to find solutions, and in order to tell them that it's getting more and more urgent to bring humanitarian assistance to these areas. My contacts in Khartoum tell me that the situation is getting worse every day, that many people do not have access to food, to electricity, to water. Millions of people are still stranded in the capital and in several other cities across Darfur and North Kordofan. And many people need medical assistance at the moment. According to doctors living in Khartoum, more than 70% of the hospitals of the capital have been destroyed or are currently occupied by either the army or the Rapid Support Forces. All these people need medical assistance, they need food, they need water, and that's why it's getting more and more urgent as the war continues to bring humanitarian assistance to these people.
So, as Bastien said, the humanitarian crisis in Sudan has been deepening. South Sudan's seen a huge influx of those fleeing fighting over the border. Most of those crossing over, though, are thought to be South Sudanese who left a civil war at home a decade ago. A sad irony is seen conflict forced them back. Caroline Lamboulé has more.
Several days on the road, belongings packed up hastily. It's a story that many of these people have already experienced once before, when they left South Sudan as civil war erupted in 2013, shortly after the country gained independence from Sudan.
If I'd had the choice, I would not have come back to South Sudan. I would have gone anywhere else, but all the roads were closed.
Years ago, Lena fled South Sudan and settled near Khartoum, where she carved out a new life for herself. But when fighting broke out just next to her home, she had to throw it all away, taking just her 2 children with her. Her husband stayed behind because they didn't have enough money to pay for his journey. Her story is far from isolated.
People used to say that South Sudan wasn't stable, so we decided to move and build a home in Sudan because of the instability. But now it's the same situation in Sudan. So what should we do? We don't know. We just don't know.
Conditions at this camp are rough. Food is scarce, children are getting sick, and some don't have anywhere to sleep. Many hope they will be able to settle in a third country. Up until last month, more than 800,000 South Sudanese refugees lived in Sudan. Since fighting erupted in Khartoum, the UN Refugee Agency has registered more than 30,000 people crossing into South Sudan. More than 90% of them are South Sudanese. Actual figures could be much higher, with many people crossing via informal border points.
Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko has been handed a 6-month suspended sentence for defaming a government minister in a decision that could rule him out of the presidential race. Sonko is President Macky Sall's top rival, and his supporters say that the charges are politically motivated. Our Sam Bradpiece brings us more.
According to the Senegalese electoral code, citizens who are given suspended sentences of 6 months or more are barred from standing as candidates in elections. That's why the decision from the court in Dakar on Monday could have major political consequences for the Senegalese opposition and their leader, Ousmane Sonko, who was on the receiving end of such a sentence. It's not all over yet, though. A higher court still needs to sign off on Monday's decision, and Mr. Sonko could still appeal. His supporters and many independent observers in Senegal believe that the legal proceedings against him are politically motivated. he still faces separate charges of raping a beauty salon employee and sending her death threats.
And Guinea's launched an investigation into what's causing fishermen to break out in severe burns and blisters after spending time at sea. Scientists are analysing seawater to try and work out what caused the injuries. They're concerned some kind of toxic chemical may have been spilled at sea. Our team tells us more.
Kwasi hasn't left his room for 2 weeks ever since his last fishing trip. His body is covered in such severe burns that he struggles to stand up.
After work, I scooped up some water to wash my face, hands and crutch. The day after, I noticed burns on my body.
Close to 300 Ghanaian fishermen have suffered similar burns over the past month. All had come into direct contact with seawater off the coast. This national hospital treats fishermen for free. Dr. Kaba is part of the commission set up to investigate what has caused these injuries.
It's an external burn on the genitals. When the fishermen relieve themselves, they use seawater to wash afterwards. This is a burn, like a regular burn that you can get from boiling water. The only specificity is that it was caused by an unidentified chemical agent. It's not an illness, it's not a virus, and it isn't contagious.
Many believe that boats have spilled toxic waste at high sea. Samples are currently being analysed at laboratories in the capital. At this fishing port in Bulbine, the so-called fisherman's disease has had a knock-on effect.
We sell very little at the moment. It's very difficult to get fish. Fishermen are scared to go to sea now.
Senegalese fishermen suffered similar symptoms in November 2020. It's still unknown what chemical substance is behind the illness and where it came from.
Well, that's it for Eye in Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Till then, take care.